Well, hello everyone. I have right here of talking about the type of conversations and the responses right here, and a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we do talk about when we do ask the questions in a lot of ways, talk about simple facts, and but still, it's like when we do talk about asking a few questions and maybe trying to get some simple facts and common sense about a lot of things, especially if it's going to be a letter, right? And you're always want to know too that you talk about for responsibility, right? And but still, it's like, but really, that when we do ask the questions a lot of times, how often are you going to really hear "I don't know" for a response, and how many times are you going to maybe hear, like whenever it comes to trying to ask a question, and so everybody might say that, yeah, every time, almost every time you're going to ask the question for sure that what's the more most common response that you're going to get most of the time? Is it really going to be an I don't know for the most part? And everybody might say, yeah, a number of times that you have conversations with your parents a lot of times, and you're 102 that hey that whenever you do talk to mom and dad about something for sure that what's is it more common to where that the answer that they usually give is to where the yeah I don't know, but still it's like yeah, so every time you do think about that you're always 102 that when we do talk about I don't know or unknown right there, what exactly is that supposed to mean right there? Could it also mean as to where that person doesn't like your response or something like that, or could it also mean as to where yeah, talk about for because right here. So this right here was supposed to be anything which it calls like maybe like a little ad or something like that. I'm like, yeah, everybody might say that what a typical conversation, and so every time you do think about your responsibilities and understanding about conversations, a lot of times, and you're always thinking too that for the most time is to where that whenever you get into most conversations that you think is toward okay, yeah, that for how you normally you get into these conversations for the most part, and most of the time it's a reminder, right? And if it's going to be a question or if it's going to be a reminder. And everybody might say that, well, really, that it could be a reminder, but still, it's like you're always 102 that, yeah, it's going to be a reminder, but, really, why do you think, on average, that, why do you think that a lot of questions would come in just because that, somebody well, had remind you to do something or something like that. And so almost every time you do think about conversations, a lot of times, it's like, yeah, does it really start out with the reminder or does it start out with the question? Maybe a few basic questions, and I want to know too that, yeah, you go ahead and write a letter explaining about going to the game or something like that. But let's just say that if you were to start a conversation a lot of times and you would get this as a response as to where, yeah, I don't know, I had no clue about what to say about that. And so really, that every time you do think about that, you're always 102 that that yeah, that you know, whenever something like yeah, they're not gonna like what you're about to say or anything like that. And usually a lot of times it's like everybody might say that almost every conversation that you've been in, for sure that that person is going to ask you to yeah make them feel a little bit more comfortable with the conversation for one. So what are the likely chances are that that person is going to respond to your question toward it because compared to I don't know. Yeah, everybody might even say too that that yeah that you go ahead and ask the questions, and what are the likelihood that this person is going to respond to where yeah they're going to go ahead and respond to the question as to where that well because it's because and So yeah, so every time you do think about that, you always want to know too that yeah, that you know, whenever you do to respond to a question to where a word of because right here, and you're always 102 that really what exactly does that mean when we do say because because of this reason or because of that reason or something like that, and so each time you do think about that, that you're warned toward it. How often are you going to hear I don't know then compared to the word because? And so maybe that's a little bit of reason why that everybody might say that each time you do have a conversation with somebody talking about something and like talk about for answer a few basic questions to where I can understand it, right? And so it sure seems that way that every time you do think about that, and you're 102 that talking about what a letter says or something like that. But whenever you do think about a letter, and so far as like to it, I am going to be going to the game, which is very crowded right here. So it sure seems that way that each time you do, that so if you were to include, like explain, for because right here or something like that. So if you were to include because right here, and you're 102, okay, yeah, because because or something like so everybody might say that how often are you really going to get that for an answer, then compared to I don't know or something like that, and like everybody might say that for the most part that whenever you do have conversations with anybody that you're going to be talking to for sure, that it's like you know, yeah, you're not gonna like, yeah, that they're gonna maybe say something like, you're not gonna like my response, so that is why that I said, I don't know, and so that's why it seems like that, everybody might say that, to be quite honest, is that, what are the chances that somebody is going to like you go ahead and start out with the sentence right here and 102 that you're going to the game and all, but still that because you're not gonna like what's your I'm like especially if it's gonna be a comment or something like that, comments, or if it's maybe gonna be about so like any conversation that you get into for sure that it's like your reaction to that. Your reaction to that. So really, what does that pretty much mean right there? So like everybody might say that you get into these conversations a lot of times, and you're always 102 that why do you think that maybe a few of these conversations they turn into arguments and they turn into back and forth conversations a lot of times. If we've done the study of the typical psychology for sure, and at your 102 is toward it, do you think that maybe a lot of everybody else, they would prefer to use the word I don't know or because rather than to be arguing about it all the time? And so like everybody might say that, almost every time you do think about that, you're 102, that maybe that they would much rather use the word because as another reason to further response rather than like or talk about for I don't know or something like that. But really, what is that really supposed to tell anybody whenever you do respond saying I don't know to a question of some kind? And really, what source of responsibility is that really supposed to mean for any reason at all? Well, what source of responsibility is that really supposed to mean if you do say I don't know all the time to every question? And like everybody might say that most applications, by the way, would say that that they're not going to take an I don't know for a response or an unknown for a response. And that's why it seems like that, people might say that you're talking about whenever you ask the questions and like I talk about making the responses shorter and everything, something to make it, make it something helpful for somebody to understand for the most part. But every time we do talk about responsibility, right, and you're always thinking as toward, okay, yeah, well, with responsibility though, that you get in these conversations a lot of times, and you're always want to know too that has anybody ever really asked you that question to where that are you willing to take full responsibility for full responsibility. So really, that it's like so every time you do think about that, and you're always want to know too that when we do talk about conversations a lot of times, that the first thing that comes to your mind is going to be is to where talk about for responsibilities. Responsibilities are just another way of how you want to call it. It's like they're like rules. They're rules that apply to anything that you're trying to work out in a range, right? But a lot of times it seems like is to where that do you necessarily think about that is toward it that is a responsibility supposed to be another way of talking about for an agenda. And I know I talked before about that to talk about for agenda, right? But still, it's like a agenda. It's basically another way of saying this toward it. We leave you like we ask the person to take care of this. We trust that person to take care of these top responsibilities right here. So it sure seems that way that every time we do speak about responsibility, right? That the year 102, that what exactly could that mean, and what exactly does that mean right there? And I can go ahead and put right here for underline right here. But still, it's like every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking too that trust and you leave your count so somebody is counting on you. Yeah, they're counting on you to provide that information. Yeah, they're counting on you to do those tasks. So every time you do think about that, and you're 102, that for the most part, when we do speak about responsibility, though, for how it's all worded, right? It's like, they're like rules, right? They're like rules. But like earlier, it was like, you write this letter right here, and everybody might say that, that seems to be like everybody might say that you can kind of tell maybe some irresponsible responses right here for how this was worded right here. Did you have the parents' permission just to be able to go to the game or something like that? And you have right here talk about for in bigger letters right here because you're not going to like my response whenever it comes to comments and everything. So every time you do think about responsibility though, and you're always want to know too that what's another way of how to describe a responsibility and everybody might say is to where that another way if you want to call it is to where it's another way of how do you set simple facts and rules about something that needs to be taken care of, and also about matters and your agendas, right? And but still, it's like each time you do think about that, and you're wondering to where that then why do you think that maybe everybody else would use I don't know then compare to because, or like everybody might say, if you're trying to get the situation under control, with something that needs to be taken care of, for sure, right? And you're always want to know too that why is it that maybe somebody doesn't use the word because for that reason, because so that way or something like that. So every time you do think about that, and you always want to know too that a number of times that you've had these conversations a lot of times, and you're always thinking as toward it, yeah, well, really, not everybody's really going to look forward to a lot of those arguments and a lot of those discussions, and so that's why it seems like that to where that you want to go ahead and respond to those questions as to where the I don't know, unknown, what is that supposed to mean? Well, that's supposed to mean is to where you're not going to like my response that I give, right away. But like everybody might say that, what's one way that you can tell your parents about how to make you feel a little bit more comfortable talking about something like that? Talk about responsibilities. And more likely, though, like everybody say, what's one thing that, that you could think about is to where, if you want to oppress them just by saying is to where that what's the smartest way of how to handle conversations, and everybody might say that what's the best way to how to handle conversations, especially if it turns into an argument, and especially whenever it does come to certain circumstances, right? And that is why it seems like that almost every conversation that you do have that may start with a reminder, right? But you're always want to know too is to where that what is the best way of how to handle any source of conversation for sure. And like everybody might say is to where first of all, it goes by saying is to where that listen to the person, listen to the speaker, listen. First of all, it seems like it starts by saying is to where listen first. And everybody might say that, that's going to probably be my first impression for sure. Listen first. Why should we listen? And like everybody might say that, anybody who's going to be talking, you need to have a good listener first before you go ahead and carry on with this conversation. So that's why it seems like everybody might say that, the first thing that you think about whenever you do start a conversation, is it really going to be about a question first, or like everybody might say that, you need to have a good listener. You need to have a good listener, somebody good heart, good listener, and listen first. And so it sure seems that way. That so like everybody might say that. Almost every time you have conversations with anybody, for sure, that it's like good listeners and all that. But still, if you respond to somebody with a conversation and 102 that I don't know, something that to where something remains unknown or something like that. But really, do you really want to answer that on every application and maybe on every conversation or something like that? No, you don't. What you really want to respond to that is to where that let me explain for anything that comes to the concern of the matter, and you make you feel a little bit more confident with that conversation, right? And that is why it seems like to where that everybody might say is to where that maybe if it would make a little bit more sense as to where that if I what if this happened? Like, so like, let's just say that if you were to respond to that, and everybody might say that, this is usually how I go too, is that, what if this person asked, what if? So usually I would start out with usually I would start out with a thought. I would start out with a thought that started like that right there, right? So it's like so every time you do think about that, and you're always 102 to you would start out with a thought. You would start out with a thought as toward a what if. What if this person asked me that question and they expected me to respond to that? And what would be the good advice that you would give to somebody if that, in case of that, if that happened. And so that's why it seems like that, you're 102, that whenever it comes to understanding about, whenever it comes to understanding about what people are thinking about, because a lot of times it's like, every time you have conversations like that, that you can go ahead and start out the conversation. You can start out by thinking as to what if this person did ask me that question and I didn't know how to respond to that, and what if, what if? So a lot of times, so if you're going to write a letter to mom and dad about something, anything that comes to your mind, right? And the first thing that you think about is, what if this person asked me this question right here? Then what would your response be to that? And like, would it be, I don't know, or I'll just go ahead and take a guess or something like that, or for because? So every time you do talk to mom and dad about something like that, and the first thing that should maybe come to your mind would be is this toward what if mom and dad did ask me this question? What would you do? What would you do in case of what if they did ask you that question? And so to me though, it's like what would you do? What would you do if mom and dad did ask you that question right there? And so that's why it seems like that, to where that every time you do think about that, and you're warned to where that, what exactly comes to your mind whenever you do think about that? And what comes to my mind most of the time is that, does it also mean is to where that maybe somebody knows something that you don't, or something like that, or you may know something that they don't, or something like that, but still. So it sure seems that way, that every time you do think about that, and you're always wondering, what if this person asked me, what would you do? So it's like, so every time you do think about that, and it's going to kind of remind you a little bit about that, is to where it's going to remind you of that letter that you wrote earlier. That letter that you wrote earlier telling mom and dad that you were at a game. That you went to the game, but that I just want to thank you for letting me go to the game, or my friends are here and they all wanted me to let you know that how difficult it was just to be able to order the tickets and all that. So every time you do think about that, and you're 102, that whenever it comes to parents' permissions or anything like that, but still, that whenever it comes to answering a few questions, though, that you go ahead and write in any source of letter or some kind of a document, and you want to go ahead and start out a question of the matter of like talking about for what if. What if this person did ask me this question right here? What would you do if this person did ask me? And really, who's responsible for providing that information? And a lot of times it's like maybe everybody, score from like maybe 5 to 10 or something like that would say that I don't know. But how often are you going to maybe say because? But like everybody might say that well, for sure that what if this person did ask me that question? You would really want to feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it, and you're 102 that you'll feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it. If that if the person does become concerned in the matter, but still. But every time you do think about that, then you're always 102 that you more likely are going to get an I don't know for an answer. But let's just say if it's going to be a reminder, or maybe if it's somebody who is going to be concerned of the matter, and they're going to be asking you the questions, right? And please explain to where I can easily understand that. Well, I believe it when I see it. And so really, that every time you do get into these conversations, that it's like, you might see some things and you may notice some things that you didn't think of before, and that's why it seems like that, to where is it really important to listen to what the other person thinks about this and what the other person has to say about that, or to think about, the other person talking, think about the other person who's listening. And so that's maybe why that everybody might say is toward it whenever you're going to be talking and get into a conversation about anything, really, that what's the best solution for that? And like everybody might say, do you think that maybe I don't know is the best answer for that? Or, do you think that maybe that you can maybe give a simple fact as toward what if this person did ask me this question right here, what do you think that your response would be? And you would go ahead and maybe write about 4 or 5 sentences or something like that in a response to that. And so that's why it seems like to where that every time you do think about responsibility, and you're warned to where that you think on average that maybe somebody, if they would have spoke up sooner, if they would have spoke up a lot sooner, then what are the chances that maybe that there could have been maybe a settlement? I'm like, oh yeah, if you would have spoke up sooner about this, then maybe that there could have been maybe a little bit more helpful tips or something like that, or it could have been a little bit more helpful if something where you came a lot sooner. And that's why it seems like to where that every time we do think about conversations, by the way, it's like those conversations are going to start out with an argument, and then they're going to turn into a conversation and all that. And maybe that's another reason why that everybody might say that whenever you do start out a question, whenever you do start a conversation about anything that you're talking about, right? If it's with mom and dad, or maybe with cousin or brother or anybody, that every time you do think about that, and you're one or two that why do you think that it has to be any more complicated than what it is? And maybe if something could have came a lot sooner, maybe if you would have given that person enough time to speak, enough time to think about something, and so then maybe that's another reason why that somebody might say this toward it. Yeah, if you can go ahead and put together maybe something to it and make it easier for somebody else to understand, such and such. But still, it's like every time you do think about that. By the way, it seems like that you always want to know too. Why does it always start out with a few basic questions, then compared to maybe you could be listening to you could be a good listener. Listen first before you start asking the questions, and before you start out with a few arguments and all that. And so that's why it seems like everybody might say that a lot of kids would probably feel a little bit more comfortable talking about something maybe that if you do take the time to listen, right? And maybe if you do, they feel a little bit more comfortable giving you a more positive answer rather than an I don't know. They could say is toward it because, and then they just start talking about it, right? And that's another reason why that people might say that whenever you do think about a conversation, try to keep the person calm. Try to keep them calm so that we can talk about it. And what would you do if you if that person did ask me that question right there? Try to keep them calm, but every time I think about that, I always think too that you go ahead and start out with the letter. You're talking about something, and you're always thinking as to what do you think that reader is thinking about? If they read this, and half the time you're always want to know too that are you talking to somebody, or are you just writing down a few sentences? I'm like, writing down a few words to where only you can understand it, or whichever. But still. So every time I think about that, I always think too that the first response that I'm going to get, by the way, is going to be I don't know. But still, I think a lot of doctors might say that if you use the word because right here, or like anybody say if you take a guess for something or something like that, and but still, that every time you do think about that, and you're always 102, are you getting the same responses or are they different responses? And your doctor, by the way, might even say that if you are getting different results, then the chances are that you are showing more progress, right? You're making better progress. You are making more progress whenever you're getting different responses, right, than compared to the same responses. So every time you do think about that, by the way, that you're always want to know too that what is the best way of how to generate enough information whenever it comes to conversations. And everybody might say that most everybody would say that just ask a few basic questions and you'll be able to get that information. But how many of us would maybe even believe that if you try to keep the person calm, calm, you try to be patient and calm, try to keep the person calm, and try to keep them calm. Try to keep them calm, and you try to keep the person calm, just for that information. So each time you do think about that, and you always want to know too that so if you are trying to get more information about something, for more information, come for more information. And I'm just trying to write here, everybody. I'm just trying to write here, but so it's like every time you do think about conversations, by the way, that more information here. It don't have to be in all caps, don't have to be a capital letter there. I'm just saying that that every time you have a conversation with anybody, that it seems like that it starts out with a few questions and all that, but you're always want to know too that why is it that why is it that it seems like that it starts out with a few yes or no questions, and then it turns out to be an argument, and then later on it turns into a conversation and all that, and that's another reason why, like everybody might say, that maybe it's best, for anybody that it's best to go ahead and write down your ideas, to kind of brainstorm ideas about talking about what if this happened, then what is the best way of how to handle that, right? So it sure seems that way, that what if this person did ask me that question, and a lot of times it's like almost every time you do think about that you're always want to know too that a number of times it's happened, by the way, that you're always want to know too that you should maybe start out by thinking as to what if this happened, and how would you handle that? And so I think that I really think that that's really the best scenario for that, overall. But like everybody else might say that almost every letter and every document that you would write, that you would answer a few questions and all that, and almost any conversation that you do get into, that the most commonly that you're going to hear "I don't know" for a response. But let's just say if you ask somebody a question, and let's just say if they did respond saying "because," and then they gave you a different response, they felt a little more comfortable talking to you just because of all it's that you felt more confident with providing that information, right? Just because that it was less stressful, and a lot of people would probably say too that you feel more comfortable talking to the person, maybe if if you felt more comfortable talking about it with somebody. So like everybody might say that almost each time it's happened, having conversations with your parents and having conversations with your children or a friend of yours, and you're warned toward it, what's most likely to where that somebody is going to feel comfortable talking to you about something, and let's just say that at the first impression that you do here is going to be an I don't know, and compared to what if this person did ask me this question, and so I would usually start out with the conversation like that. What if this person did ask me this question right here, and what would your response be to that right there? And yeah, what if? Well, what if? And so I would respond to that, and there's enough room right here to word that. Yeah, well, what if? Well, I would say. So really, I guess if you were to say something like that, for sure, that I guess like everybody might say that that's another way of how you want to think out loud. If you're going to be thinking out loud, about something before you actually say it out loud, right? So it's like, yeah, out loud, and yeah, out loud. So it's like, yeah, everybody might say that that there's a type of word for it, I'm sure, but yeah, out loud. Yeah, there's a word for it, I'm sure, but like everybody everybody might even say too, out loud. And no, it's out loud. Think out loud. I think maybe with the W. Anyway, yeah, think out loud right there. Oh, I'm trying to. Loud. Okay. Yeah. Out loud. Oh, I know it. I'm just everybody might say that almost every conversation that you get with somebody, for sure, you think out loud, or you think silently or something like that. But I know it. Everybody might say that, whenever you do think out loud. But still, really, that every time you do think about writing a letter, by the way, it sure seems that way. That yeah, that you think. So every time you do think about, I'm like, yeah, every time you do think, it seems like that. Why is it that those are two different things, and compared to if you're talking to a group of people? I'm like, that's one thing I would like to know too. That every time you do write a letter, by the way, if it's to mom and dad, by the way, why is it? Why is it that that there's a difference between thinking out loud and compared to talking to a group of people and all that, talking to other people, and yeah, whenever you're thinking to yourself or thinking out loud, and that's another reason why that everybody might say that every time you do write a letter, about something, that the first thing that's going to come to my mind, and I can tell you, I'll be quite honest with you, everybody here. Every time I do think about that, by the way, I always think as toward it, anybody else that could be reading my writing, anybody else who could be reading my letter, or reading the notes that I leave, or sticky notes, or whichever it is, anybody who could be reading this, for sure. The first thing that I'm thinking about is that, really, does it really have to make sense? Does it have to make sense, especially if you've been there? But still, whenever you do think out loud and compared to thinking to yourself, right? And it seems like that those are two or three different things or so, but still. So every time you do think about that, and you always want to know too that that hey, that whenever you do think about that, that you're thinking about that are you always thinking about that that hey, that how do you respond to those comments? Yeah, the comments from earlier, or something like that. And I could put comments right here, but still. But it's like, yeah, so every time you do think about that, and you always want to know too that why does it start out with maybe a few basic questions, and it turns into a conversation, and then it turns into an argument, and then it's going to maybe turn into, this, what you call this, did you, were you able to get everything? Yeah. Were you able to get, any source of, an agreement or, yeah. So it's like, so almost every conversation that you do, start, you start talking to somebody, right? And almost all the time that you think about that, and you're always one or two you go ahead and write a letter, but at the time, it's like, not everybody knows what you're talking about, not everybody knows what you're thinking about, so the first impression that you're going to be thinking about is that, who could be reading my letter, who could be, what if this person did ask me this question right here, and what would your response be to that, and what anything that you would like to comment and question about, or something like that, and so that's why it seems like that, to where each time you do think about that, by the way, that people might say is to where, well, for sure, you're going to go ahead and write a much detailed letter, if you're just thinking to yourself or something like that, but, maybe if somebody else were to be reading it or something like that, or what if this person did ask me that question, then you felt a little bit more comfortable talking about it, just because that, this person, they've been there, they've been in that same situation, and they felt a little bit more comfortable talking about it with you, and, so really, how often should we use the word, for I don't know? And like everybody might say that, you can use the word I don't know as to word I don't know really what to say, or I don't really know because I don't really know what you expect from that or something like that. But still, but talk about for I don't know, and like, really, what if this person did really ask me, what would you do? If this person did ask me, and do you think that they would leave you responsible for providing that information? And that's why it seems like to where that whenever you do think about that, by the way, that you're thinking is toward it all started out with just a few basic questions before it turned into a conversation. Talk about for simple facts and rules, right? But really, what would your parents necessarily say? They might even say is to where, come on, tell me the truth. What's really going on? And I know most parents are going to tell you that is to where that, well, you better tell me the truth and start talking. You better start, you better tell me the truth and start talking. And, so that's why it seems like to where that, every time you do think about that, and you're 102 that, that sounds like a request or a demand or something like that, but like everybody might say that, almost every time you do think about that, by the way, almost every time you do, almost every time you do think about that, and you're warned to where that, anyway, but every time you do think about that, right? But anyway, but talk about true. But really, well, what would you do in case if somebody asked you that question, right? But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a good day.